All right. Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you guys are in the world. We're going to go ahead and get things started. We'll do some introductions, so just gives everyone a chance to get logged on and dialed in. Uh, so my name is Michael Kraft. I am the senior sales engineer here at Augmentt, and with me on the call is the man of the hour, David Haynes. He is our information security officer. He is the one that will be showing you guys the ins and outs of Microsoft and CSP portal and GDAP and some of the security best practices that we're going to get into today. So with no further ado, I'll hand things over to David. You'll hear me kind of jumping in from time to time, asking questions, but for the most part, David is going to be running things today. So yeah, David, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah. So this is part 2 of kind of our 3-part series that we wanted to get into. If you attended the last session last week, or this is going to be a bit of a recap, but fundamentally what we talked about last week were why you as an MSP wants to make sure that you are comfortable with GDAP and you have it implemented. Big one is just basic security practices for anybody in the tech space, particularly with MSPs. Least privileged access in your tenant's environment. It's going to really make you have a much better security structure that you can build on top of. Using GDAP for role-based access control. That's really important for compliance reasons. If you are an MSP going for SOC 2, which we've this past 8-12 months, we've got a lot of requests from MSPs saying, hey, I'm going through my SOC 2. We need information from you as one of our vendors. And then also just-in-time permissions is a really cool tool within Microsoft with PIM. And we'll get into that. But really, as an MSP, using GDAP is just one of the things that you should be doing. So again, yeah, least privileged access within your tenant's environment, being able to time gate access either through the relationship itself, or for within the access controls that you grant through PIM and with security groups. And then also customer control. It gives a little bit more control within your customer, being able to revoke or remove access. As an MSP and a business owner, I can understand why you might feel uncomfortable with that, but it gives that trust relationship. And also, if you're able to set up a really clean, secure relationship and partnership with your customer, following industry best practices, it's both a selling opportunity for you when you're doing prospecting with an with a potential customer, and then also kind of protects you against other people picking on your implementation of GDAP in the same way that you could if people don't have as sophisticated of an understanding. So we're going to go through kind of like the four things here, or 5 things setting up GDAP. And I'm going to start off with a couple tools that Augmentt started building, and we're going to continue to iterate on to make this whole process much easier and straightforward. But setting up a relationship, approving it, managing security groups, applying GDAP in that regards, and then using PIM to manage it, and how that ties into your workflow as an MSP. Michael's going to be kind of playing the role of the MSP, asking questions as we go that he gets in onboardings all the time, as he's much more customer facing than I am. And then he's also going to be moderating the chat to make sure that we answer any questions as we go. Again, like most security conversations, there's a lot of opinion and a lot of it's all based on your risk tolerance and what you're actually working with and who your actual clients are. So some of the it's very much open for agreement or disagreement in terms of how far you want to take things like role-based access control and limiting your access, and how much you want to, because security comes at a cost, and that cost is usually business efficiency. Yeah, it's absolutely easier to just have a global admin account, go in, fly into a user's tenant, make any changes that you want, but that sacrifices security. So finding that balance, and that's a conversation that you'll have to have internally as an MSP to figure out what your risk tolerance is and how you want to set things up. So I'm going to stop sharing the slides and kind of dive into this screen here within Augmentt. Many of you
David,
partners with Augmentt. Sorry,
real quick, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but real quick, just before you get started, you brought up a good point. about questions, and something I failed to mention at the beginning of this call is, as David is taking you guys on this tour of the Microsoft side of things and the Augmentt side of things, if any questions do come up along the way, feel free to type them up in the Q&A box, and I'll be glad to, like David said, I will kind of moderate. I'll ask him some of your questions along the way. Barry, I know actually we already have a question from Barry in regards to creating a GDAP relationship. When David gets to that point, I'll bring up your question. But like I said, I will moderate and bring up questions as David goes along. So David, continue. You do have one question already, and when we get to GDAP setup, I'm going to bring it up.
And actually, I'm going to touch on that right now because this question drove me nuts. For those of you who are following on the chat, I'm going to answer it live. If you've seen the error, we are unable to validate your create new GDAP relationship request at this time. Be advised, anonymous connections are not allowed for this service. If you believe this, receive this message in error, please try your request again. This drove me crazy. I was trying to build a bunch of test relationships as we were building out this GDAP audit tool, and I kept getting blocked. And I chased it back to the fact that I was running NordVPN on my my machine. So it was being blocked by the fact that I was running a VPN. I think that people should run VPNs, but Microsoft was saying no. So I quit my VPN, restarted the browser session, and I was able to make relationships just fine at that point. That I think is worth investigating if you're doing any sort of a anonymized traffic there. I think that's a component to it. But we'll get to creating relationships later on. If you're partnered with Augmentt, you've probably seen a screen that looks kind of like this. The one that's in production right now is different. It doesn't have 3 colors. It's ready, not ready. As I said, we're building tools to make managing GDAP easier for MSPs. We've had comments from people saying, yeah, we had a tech build this out for us 6 months ago. We hired a contractor, or the person who was on our team who had this knowledge left. And so it's a bit of a black box for us. So we want to make it a little bit easier for initially for Augmentt to make it faster for people to actually get value from the product, build this audit tool. We've got a lot of feedback from it. And so now we have ready, possible limitations, not ready. These are all based off of the permissions in the security group that are connected to the relationship and the relationship itself. So for your, you can think of Augmentt just like you'd think of anybody on your team. There are certain roles and permissions that you need to do your job. And it should be very tightly spec'd to what you actually need to do. Very little actually requires global admin permissions. And if you do need global admin permissions, that's usually for things like creating custom roles within Microsoft or Entra rather, and a handful of other things. So there are valid reasons, but generally speaking, most MSPs can get by with being very tailored in the permissions that they need. And same thing with Augmentt. We require 13 roles, and we want to make it easy for MSPs to identify, hey, this relationship has those roles. We've connected to the security groups. But this one here, for example, is missing 4 roles on the relationship and 4 roles on the security group. That's hard to fix because you can't retroactively add roles to a relationship. You can only request a new relationship and then add those roles on the security group. So to start with, I'm going to show how we fix Cypress CSPA as a tenant, fix the relationship here, getting admin agents back in. We're going to create a new relationship for a different tenant, and then kind of go into managing the security groups and how that looks like. So pivoting over to another window where I have the partner center. One thing that we get MSPs get confused on as well, or people that we talk to, is the difference between customers and administrators. Customers, from my understanding, is that this is kind of a relic of DAP when they were delegated admin permissions for your customers versus GDAP, where you have more of an administrative relationship. So this list might be long. It's short for us because we didn't have very many DAP relationships, but you want to quickly go over to the administer tab. And this is where you either request a new relationship or you can see your current tenants. So clicking into here, I can see we've got some old terminated ones. We've got one that's approval pending. I'm going to go into this active relationship here. And here's where I can see what security groups are available to it. I can see the roles, and I can see that admin agents is here, and it has roles. Did I pick the right tenant? Sorry. CA, SSM, it's found. I might have needed to run this again because one of the problems that this is a development environment. We have many different cooks in the kitchen, so I might have not. People might be playing with things in the background. But if admin agents was missing, you'd come into here, add security group, and for example here, I'm going to add these two security groups here: level 2 help desk and level 3 help desk. This is a very common use case for MSPs, where you want to have the different groups and different tiers of support have access to different permissions. So yeah, the roles here probably aren't very indicative of what you're likely to use, but it's to show that actually, sorry, I'm going to back out and just do one at a time, because my level 2 help desk, they're going to get exchange, groups, authentication, and conditional access administrative permissions. My level 3s, I'm going to give them the global admin access, because people who request that security group through PIM will have access to that permission temporarily, time gated, and a secondary approval is going to be required. So that's why I'm a little bit more comfortable giving global admin permissions to that role. So again, anybody who's assigned to the security group that's connected to the relationship will have those roles within that tenant's environment to go and do service management actions. So to go in and reset passwords, go into Lighthouse or SharePoint, make changes there. And it's the same thing with any of your applications that you're connecting to your CSP, like Augmentt, or any of the other automation tools out there, or BI tools. They're going to connect into here, and it's the roles that you grant them in the security group that the integrated user is a part of, which is why we added this piece here. Right now it's static to admin agents, but we're checking, does the security group that the integrated user is a part of, is that connected to the relationship, and does it have all of the roles? Because if it does, then we should be able to see success across the board. And we can see here now, Cypress CSPA does actually have all of the permissions. And in our new version, we do have we do highlight that it's 13 plus GA. We'd rather you not give Augmentt global admin. If that makes sense.
So to that point, David, then, so we're saying that we don't want you to give Augmentt GA. We want you to limit us to only what we need. And we can do that through the admin agents. So similarly, if I have, say, a GDAP relationship that has a bunch of roles, including GA, I could segment this out between techs. So like you just did, my level 2 techs, they don't have GA. They only have the roles that I've assigned to them, even though they're a member, or even though that security group is a member of that GDAP relationship, I can still limit what they can and cannot do within the customer's environment based on the security groups that they're in.
Exactly. And that's the whole idea of least privilege access. You as an MSP are going to have different people on your team do different amounts of things in each customer's tenant. And you want to then segregate that by the security groups that those people are a part of. Just like how you don't give your own internal team access to your Entra environment, you give certain people internal permissions to do certain actions, or no actions. And that's where Augmentt comes in. If you have people that you don't want to give any access to your user's tenant, you give them least privilege access through a single portal like Augmentt. The real value to this is that it makes it much easier to track which tenant actually has user accounts in. Ultimately, no tenants should have any MSP user accounts in. That's the way Microsoft would want you to. And that's kind of following least privilege access to the T. I know that that's not realistic for a lot of people. They want to have at least one admin account in that tenant. And I understand that. But yeah, being able to segregate that out by security group. So for example, here, this company here, I set the relationship up, cleverly named relationship with all roles. So going back over into the partner center and going to Cypress CSPB, relationship with all, you can see here, I've given this relationship every role. And so for level 2 help desk, I can make it a little bit more granular okay, these are the things that I know my level 2 techs are going to be doing. These are what my level 1 techs are going to be doing. We have some billing coordinator who might need to go in and pull some insights in terms of license utilization. So I'm going to give them some billing permissions, or reports, report readers, for example. Or maybe we're going to be doing a push on security. So I'm going to create a special security group that is designed specifically for people to go in and, like, it's going to be Matt and Leo on our team, and they're going to do compliance work. They're going to do a big push to get people's Microsoft secure scores up. And they need to be able to go in and do that. So I'm going to give that security group very specific permissions, and then assign those users to those security groups.
So David, I've seen quite often, and I fully understand because it's easy to do it this way, and I can see it on your screen where you might create a GDAP relationship that has every role in there. So you can, essentially, you could give someone every right that's available there. Is that a good way to do it, or is that best practice is to create that GDAP relationship with all of the roles and then segment it by security group?
You want to give yourself as many roles as you as a business are realistically going to need. If you aren't going to be doing any phishing simulation as part of your workflow using Microsoft's Defender attack simulator, you don't need to give yourself those permissions. If you're not going to be doing any external ID user flow administration, don't give yourself those permissions. All that does is that that widens the breadth of what a potential attacker is able to do should one of your team get breached. So if you limit what you actually can do in your customer's environment, standardize it, not only does that let you be more focused in your security, but then it allows you to have a very clear statement of work to your customers. We're requesting these permissions because by contract, we're going to be doing these 100 tasks for you on a monthly basis and on a daily basis. Anything extra is going to require additional permissions. And so you can request a new relationship and say, hey, previously you weren't doing any SharePoint administration. So you go SharePoint admin, contract, customer.
Hey, David, while you're writing the name, can you use the same name twice?
No, you can't use the same name twice. You want it to be unique.
Yes.
I believe you can't have the same name twice for active or pending. You might be able to get away with it with terminated relationships. I can't recall, but I've been denied when it's duplicate. But if you want to do any additional contract work for an additional fee, or if the customer wanted you to add on to that the work that you always do, we hear time and time again with MSPs that scope creep. Oh, our customers asking us to do more than what we had originally talked about. This makes it a really convenient barrier to not like jump in to doing more, and have that as a conversation saying, hey, yeah, absolutely, we'd love to do that for you, but that's not part of our original agreement. We don't even have the permissions to do that. That's going to require a new relationship. And there's additional fees attached with it. It creates a natural selling point for you to drive business outside of your normal workflow. So as we create a new relationship here, SharePoint contract, you go through, you find the permissions that you need. So in this case, I'm going to do SharePoint administrator. I've set it for 30 days. The max you can have it is 730 days, which is just shy of 2 years. And I can set it to auto extend, which will auto extend by 6 months. I believe that is indefinite until either you, the MSP, or your customer cancels it. The one caveat is that if you were to select global admin from this list, you aren't able to auto extend. It's just another way that Microsoft is encouraging you to please don't take global admin. Again, the big push from DAP to GDAP is from the SolarWinds breach that we are all too familiar with in the space. And a huge component of that was DAP was, like we talked about in the last webinar, it was either help desk admin or global admin as your permissions that you could request. And if we're honest, 99% of people took global admin. So here, finalize request for this relationship. It's going to provide me with a link. It's going to give me a description. I could copy this to my clipboard and send it to my customer. I can take this link if I'm on chat with them, send it to them. We have seen MSPs who do have like a break glass kind of GA account, take this, log in, approve the relationship. It depends on the business relationship you have with your tenant and sort of like how they're expecting you to manage that flow. Microsoft doesn't want you to do that, but that's how you manage your security stack is that.
When
As I
and
said,
David,
it's part of your risk tolerance that you set
yeah.
up with yourself and your team.
Well, and even by being able to have a time bound relationship, it's kind of nice. So like just like you pointed out, maybe the SharePoint work isn't part of your contract right now, but your customer wants to do it. So you're going to do a temporary, all right, for 30 days, we're going to work on this project. You're of course going to charge them for that. And then you don't have to worry about at the end of those 30 days, you don't have to worry about, making changes again. That's it. The 30 days are over. The relationship is terminated and you're done.
Exactly. And just tying that back to Augmentt, we want MSPs to use Augmentt. Obviously, we want it to be a tool for you to leverage. The threat report, Michael, that's free to use, right?
That is free to use, yes.
That is free to use. So what you can do is you're prospecting a customer. You don't want to take full global admin access or anything like that. You want to be very soft in your request for permissions. If you come into here and you say prospecting, I cannot type when I'm in front of people, and do a 30-day relationship, and you select global reader. If I can find it easily, global reader, and then I believe it's application administrator. This one allows us to propagate Augmentt as an app into their tenant. But with these two permissions, finalize the request, you can send this link to your customer and say, hey, if you approve this link, we can connect, we can run the threat report and see just how exposed you are to outside risks, completely for free. We won't have access to anything else. We're just looking at data. We're just reading things. Now, within Augmentt, you won't be able to affect change or anything. That's a way that you can start the conversation with them through CSP in a very white gloved kind of positioning. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, and what's nice about that too is that you say at the end of those 30 days, at the end of the month, you present the client with this report. I mean, obviously we want the customer to say, yes, we want you to fix this for us. We want to be more secure. And then at that point, you could create a new GDAP relationship that's much longer. You would assign your Augmentt licenses. But if the customer says no, then once again, like we just talked about, just let that relationship expire. Done.
Exactly.
No extra work for you guys.
Exactly. And again, going into your Entra environment, which is here, or going to the customer's Entra environment and looking in their delegated admin partners. This is a great. This is my MSP account, so I don't actually have any partners here. But this is a great conversation to have with your customers. Hey, is your MSP managing you through directly, or are they using GDAP? Are they using least privilege here, or are they leaving you open to attack from themselves as the MSP? We're better than that. We're going to do a better job for you. This is why. And on that, before we get into PIM, one thing that comes up time and time again in our onboardings is, especially if you're dealing with more high security focused customers, people who have super locked down, constrictive conditional access policies. They don't want anybody getting access to anything ever outside of certain areas or devices, all things that I totally understand. Internally here, we have various MFA strength requirements for accessing different things, location-based policies, and device management policies. So fully on board with all of that. But one thing you can do, and I'm just going to do this as an example. This is, again, it's a test demo environment. There's a lot of clutter. But for example, this groups and roles test, imagining if this is one of the conditional access policies that was super restrictive, under the exclusions, you can select B2B collaboration members, which to the best of my knowledge is any of your MSP users, including Augmentt as an application. So if you are being denied access without creating an unnecessarily large exclusion to their policies, you can very quickly add exclusions to yourself to those tenants, giving you a little bit better access to their environment, if not to leverage Augmentt as a tool, but be able to go in and access their tenant regardless of our platform. So that was something that I came across that helped an MSP get access to an engineering firm that they were working with. The engineering firm was fine with it, and now they're able to use the tool. Tying back to here, we've kind of talked about setting up the relationship, approving it. We send the link off to the customer, they approve it, or MSPs self-approve it usually. We've shown the setting up security groups. The next step in Entra is assigning the security groups to the users. It should be fairly straightforward to most people here. Probably you're more fluent at it than I am. I've not done a tremendous amount of Microsoft or Entra admin. But yeah, we have this level 2 help desk group here. And so this is the security group that I'm going to add Michael to. So he's now a permanent member. And so any relationship that has the level 2 help desk security group added to it with those specific roles, Michael now has those granularly set delegated admin roles applied to him. So he'd be able to go in and make, and as though he were a user in that tenant, take actions with those roles. The piece that I think is really cool that really pushes people to, I think we should push people to a P2 license internally at MSPs is PIM. And it's the idea specifically around the just-in-time and time-gated permissions that you can grant. So going down to here, under groups, you can see here I've got level 2 help desk, level 3 help desk, partner global admins, and admin agents. We've heard a lot of people, so one of the things that we recommend is creating a service account for Augmentt. Makes it a lot easier for you to control your environment. So you create like service augmentt@msp.com as a user. If you assign that integrated user does need to be a global admin to Microsoft requirement. But if you assign global admin to that user using PIM, it can be time gated for an hour while you create the integration. And then it will lose that global admin. So that user account, should anybody ever breach it through its MFA, through its password, it won't be able to do anything because it doesn't have any permissions. And that same thing is applied here. It's not just just-in-time permissions for groups. It's just-in-time or just-in-time permission for roles. It's just-in-time permission for groups as well. So on the level 3 help desk, on the settings with PIM, as a member, I've set it active duration is 2 hours. So anybody who wants to get access to this security group only gets access to it for 2 hours, and then they need to require a new request. In this one, they have to require a justification. They have to give the ticket information, the ticket ID of why they're requesting it. I didn't enable the require approval to activate, but if you have any need for a global admin, or maybe you have a certain set of security group permissions that you want tighter control over, like authentication administrator, conditional access policy administrator, anything that's going to, if turned off, open a customer up for wider attack, or edit like conditional access policies to create exclusions, you can they'll be forced to require approval. So if Michael requests an approval to this, access to this group, he has to provide all this information. It then goes to me, or other approvers to say, yep, Michael, you can have access to that permission, access to that group. And again, it's time gated for 2 hours. And then you can set the communications on that. So notifications when members are assigned to the as eligible to this role, you can set it so you don't get completely bombarded. We've heard some MSPs get frustrated with the amount of notification that they get. That's because they have it set to full bore fire hose. Please notify me on everything. But you can talk, you can play around with when you get assigned and if the emails are critical or not.
So without PIM, like say you wanted to give me this access, just like we're doing now for like 2 hours so I can work on a project. Without PIM, you would either have to just go ahead and give me stuff that I don't actually need and hope that I don't abuse my power, or B, you would have to go in here, make changes, either add me to a security group or change my roles, and then have to remember that after the 2 hours, come back in here and make those changes again.
Yeah, exactly. It's a very manual process.
Right.
There's a question in the chat from Jesse. What is the activation time supposed to be? I have group-based PIM set for several roles, and the users never seem to get the roles applying in the client's tenant. The group-based PIM set for several roles, and the users never seem. Are the roles so? The one thing to call out, and I could be misunderstanding your question. You can assign users roles through groups, so a group can have roles attached to it. Those roles are independent of the roles in the security groups that you configure on the partner center. And this is where like it becomes very much a crazy person web on a wall kind of understanding. So if you have in Entra, I have a group level 3 help desk, and I assigned that group 10 roles here. That is completely independent of the roles that are assigned here. So on the relationship going into here, if I were to go level 2 help desk next, and just give it all the roles for the sake of this demonstration, that is going to give permissions in the individual tenant, and have nothing to do with the roles that are assigned here. That's how I understood your question. And if not, we can dive into it. We can do a one-on-one call and kind of dive into it separately outside of this. But that's the other thing that makes PIM really cool, is being able to assign roles to groups and then time manage through groups. Ultimately, like again, as an opinion-based piece, that I think more organizations should be doing group-based membership for roles internally versus direct assignment of roles. It just makes things a lot easier to manage, especially for like if you're going for your SOC 2 or SOC 1 or SOC 2, a component of it is tracking people's changing of permissions as they change position in your company or as they come or leave. And it's a lot easier to do if you're using fixed groups. And also for your onboarding, hey, you're a level, like you're going into marketing, so you're part of the marketing group versus the individual roles. I have the groups configured in the relationship, and I'm using PIM to add members to the group and enter. Okay. In terms of the time that it should take to activate, I've seen it on calls. It's almost immediate. Michael, has that been your experience when they've activate PIM?
Yeah, for the most part. Now, of course, it's Microsoft, so that time can vary. Sometimes it is immediate, sometimes it takes a few minutes, but typically it is within, say, 5 minutes or less. Yeah, that's what I normally see, at least.
Long enough, like short enough time that we can do it on the call and it not be an uncomfortable gap.
Yeah,
has been my experience.
Not a lot of awkward silence to fill.
No, but Jesse, happy to have a call afterwards for 15 minutes, kind of dive into it and see if there's anything that we see on our side. Again, I mean, most people have seen where we're taking CSP and GDAP with improving our audit to make visibility into people's CSP setup easier. Right now, obviously heavily focused on getting it more functional for people to connect to Augmentt. We've had a lot of MSPs join who've been kind of peripherally aware of what GDAP and CSP is, but not actively like working on building or maintaining a functional setup. But I know that in long term, the plan is to make it a lot easier for you to identify potential security flaws within your GDAP. Like here, the relationship has GA, the security group might have GA as well. So tracking that, making it easier to see those kind of potential risks, but then also, like I went through and I had to rebuild seven relationships this past week to make this easier to test and demo and visually more interesting. And it was a painful experience. And so I know that we're working on tools to make the whole GDAP process a lot easier. Because I think was it Michael or Neil on our team that said they've never heard anybody say anything good about the partner center.
It's probably Neil, but I'm right there with them. I don't think I've ever heard anyone say I love the partner center. It's so fast and so easy to use. I don't think I've heard that a single time.
It's not confusing. It's not confusing at all.
Yeah.
Good. That's most of what I wanted to kind of touch on in terms of setup, approval, the security groups, PIM, and GDAP. I hope I kind of pulled it together in a way that made sense for people. If there was anything that you felt as though, yeah, this is all pretty rudimentary, basic, totally understand. If you felt as though there were some new things that I touched on, great. And if you have any other questions, please reach out either to support or to, I believe my email is copied on the invite. If not, it's pretty easy to track down.
David, I thought of something else too when you're talking about PIM, where like we were bringing up the fact that like say a 2-hour job and you set up your technicians to have access for the 2 hours they need to do that job. But something else I wanted to add to that is that it doesn't mean that the minute you, David, the Microsoft manager master hits the button, that doesn't mean it's just 2 hours from that point forward. It's 2 hours once that tech hits the activate button and fills out the information, correct? So that way you could set it up for me ahead of time, knowing I'm going to be working on this project at some point in time today. So that way, when I'm ready to start the project, I hit activate, then the 2 hours starts.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So if you're having like your morning meetings with your team, saying you can be like, yeah, Michael, no worries, I'll get you pre-approved for that permission for today, time gated, and then yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Well, I do want to thank all of you guys for attending. Our second session, the second part of our GDAP webinar trilogy. I've already seen some reviews coming in saying it's the Empire Strikes Back of the trilogy. Hopefully the next one won't have Ewoks in it, but the follow-up will be the final session of this series. So hopefully all of you guys can join us for that one. But thank you, David, for showing us the Microsoft Partner Portal and showing us how to be more secure and how to set up GDAP. As David mentioned, any questions that you guys have, feel free to reach out to us later on, email, phone calls, chats. We're here to help. So
Michael's personal cell number is,
yeah,
I don't actually know it.
David's address is, but yeah,
cool. Fantastic.
Thank you guys, and we'll see you in the next one.
Thank you.
All right, bye.